It's not just something that happened in the past. It's very present.
Cancers like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and soft tissue sarcoma and birth defects are now part of life for thousands of Vietnamese and Americans. I'm Femi OK. Today, the ramifications of the use of Agent Orange during the Vietnam War, 40 years on. There will be viewers who will not know this story from 40 years ago, may not have even been born. Malika Bilal, our digital producer, you're going to help sort of fill in some of those blanks, as will I, during this entire program. Right. What do you have for us?
Definitely quite a few viewers. And so for those who aren't familiar with the events 40 years ago, we have the Stream's new app. There are stats and figures like this one that we're featuring here. The U.S. military sprayed 12 million gallons of Agent Orange, a herbicide, on southern Vietnam. Now, for those of our community members who do know a little something about this topic, we're hearing things like this. This is from Eddie, who tweeted us, "We're concerned that there are those who may not know about the effects of Agent Orange." So we'll get into that today, and we want your help to do that. Tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
The powerful herbicide Agent Orange got its name because it was shipped in orange-striped barrels. During the Vietnam War, the US military sprayed millions of gallons of it to wipe out the hideouts and food supply used by North Vietnamese troops. But the chemical had a far greater reach.
I mean, come on, a lot of those guys were fighting just like us, and a lot of them were just civilians out there plowing the fields. And suddenly this Agent Orange drops on them, and they are wounded forever.
It's estimated that 4.8 million people in Vietnam have been exposed, with over 3 million of them suffering from it. The Vietnamese Red Cross estimates that more than 150,000 Vietnamese children have been born with birth defects as a result. Statistics for US victims are vague, although at one point the US Veterans Administration presumed that any of the 2.8 million troops could have been exposed. Joining us to talk about this issue on the phone from Ohio, we have Heather Bowser. She's an Agent Orange survivor and co-founder of Children Vietnam Veterans Health Alliance. In London, we have Dr. Niall Kirkpatrick, a surgeon and medical director with Facing the World. That's an organisation that provides life-changing surgeries for children in Vietnam impacted by Agent Orange. On set, we have No Tan Yan. He's a Vietnamese-American scholar and a founder of the Vietnam Agent Orange Relief and Responsibility Campaign. And on the phone in Da Nang, Vietnam, Chuck Palazzo is a US veteran who works to help Vietnamese dealing with the effects of Agent Orange. Let me just show you something here on my laptop, first of all. This is an area, this is Vietnam, and this area, everywhere you can see red, was sprayed with Agent Orange sometime between 1961 and 1971. So you can see where in the landscape Agent Orange was sprayed. Lian, you were around at that time. You've got first-hand experience. When Agent Orange came into your neighborhood, what did you see?
I was living in Saigon, and when I grew up, I have friends in Thủ Đức, which is an outskirt of Saigon. I noticed one day that all the papaya tree got shrunk.
In one day?
In one day.
So it went from what to what? How big?
From full-fledged leaves and fruits. Yeah. The next day it is wilted, and the chicken that we grew together with my friend died, and we had to eat chicken very fast because, you know, it's such a
Did the chicken all die the very next day?
Yes. And
did you eat them when they dropped dead, or did you eat them
before they're totally dead?
Yeah.
Because we grow them for food, and then suddenly we lost all of it very quickly. And
were there no alarm bells? Were you not thinking, my chicken just dropped dead, maybe I shouldn't be eating it? Was there any sense of that at all?
No, we didn't know.
Right.
Some people from the army who are neighbor saying that they were spraying Agent Orange from afar, and the wind brought it to our area. That was the wind effect of bringing the Agent Orange fog into our area.
And did you know what it was?
No, we didn't know. We didn't know what it was.
All right.
But many years before, the government of South Vietnam did announce that they were spraying herbicide, and it was safe.
Okay. All right, so he told you it was safe. Malika.
Right. Well, it's so interesting to hear that story. We're also hearing a story from a second generation of people. This is from Tren. She writes in, when I was 8, my parents found some strange features on my face. I had more than 4 operations, but that did how many people thought I was affected by Agent Orange because my father used to be a soldier in central Vietnam. So Niall, I want to go to you with this because I know that you treated this young lady. What touched you the most about her story?
Well, I first met Trang about 8 years ago. Initially, when we set up Facing the World as a craniofacial charity, we planned to bring children from all over the world with craniofacial deformities. And we were contacted by a wonderful agency in Da Nang called Children of Vietnam. And they asked us if we could help Trang. At that time, Trang had a huge tumor behind her upper jawbone on the right-hand side and behind her eye, which was pushing her face and her eye forwards and outwards, so that her face on the right-hand side was about 90 degrees to the angle it should have been. And unfortunately, Trang was such a young girl that she was really blighted by this. She was having a difficult time at school. She wasn't able to attend school. She wouldn't say boo to a goose. We brought her at that time to the UK for treatment and operated on her to remove the tumour and straighten her face out. And the transformation in Trang following that was absolutely extraordinary because it wasn't the fact that just her face had changed, but she now could get on with her life. And very quickly, Trang was back at school and the top of class. As she went through her schooling, she ended up being top of the province and went on to university in Hue to read finance. And in fact, Trang graduates this summer from university as the top student in her financial degree course. So, her life really was changed by the surgery rather than just her face being changed.
Sure. Heather, I can see you smiling there. I also had some acknowledgement when I asked Nhan about, did you know what it was that was making the chickens drop dead? And you were like, no. Your dad was also exposed to chemicals during the Vietnam War. Tell us his story.
My father served in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969. He was stationed in Van Hoa at Long Binh base in the Dong Nai province. His base was sprayed quite regularly by C-123 planes. They also did a lot of hand pumping around the perimeters and things because where his base was located was near where the headquarters of Operation Ranch Hand was in that area. I was born in 1972 after my mother had 2 miscarriages. I was born without my right leg below the knee, several of my fingers, as you can see, and my big toe on my left foot. I was born 2 months premature. I weighed 3 pounds, 4 ounces. I was very small, and my parents had no idea what had happened and why I was born this way.
When did they work it out? Because your mum also had a number of miscarriages, your dad was really sick. At what point did they kind of begin to join the dots and work out, I think this is connected to Vietnam?
Yeah. There was a gentleman, and I don't remember his last name at the moment, but he went on the Today Show in the United States in 1978, and he announced to the world that he was a Vietnam veteran. He was dying of cancer, and he said that that he was killed in Vietnam and didn't even know it. And that's when people started talking about Agent Orange, and that's when people started to understand that there was problems. And so at that point in time, my parents started to do lots of research, and they became interested in activism to try to figure out what happened. And then shortly after that, in '86, my father became very ill.
Right. Nhan, if you take us to Vietnam today and we look at the population, what part of the population, how big a problem is it with a second generation even being impacted by Agent Orange?
An estimate of today is about 3 million. We had invited many Vietnam Agent Orange victim to the U.S. and one of the women, most of them didn't know that they had Agent Orange until President the U.S. gave them the list of illness that are affected by Agent Orange, and they started to realize that.
So all these children and these families are being impacted, and nobody had actually told them.
They didn't know it until 2001.
Wow.
And so one of the women that I had in my home was Nguyễn Thị Hồng. She came to the U.S. In 2006, and she died in 2007.
Tell us about her.
She, her skin shred every day.
Oh my goodness.
And she had cancer, and then she was bleeding on her breast all the time. And then when she sat in court, her skin still shred. Every morning we have to vacuum her skin because her skin shred every day. And she didn't have it during the war. After the war, she was staying in Biển Hùng, which is near Biên Hòa, where a lot of Agent Orange was buried underground, and it seeped into the lake.
Yeah.
And she was really heavily affected by it, and she died 1 year after.
Goodness me. Malika?
Well, we're hearing other stories from victims and family members of victims. So this is from Tish. She writes in, my cousin's adverse impact from Agent Orange includes Parkinson's at age 64. And she continues saying, coping is the hardest part. He misses the steady use of his hands. So Chuck, I want to go to you because I know that you're an Agent Orange activist, and you're actually in the heart of the place where this was most effective. Can you tell us about why you decided to move back there?
Well, one of the when I first returned to the U.S. after the war, or after my participation in the war, it was 1972. Several years after that, I started to realize and started to find out that some of my fellow veterans who I served with in Vietnam and their children were starting to become very ill, starting to experience a series of diseases and ailments. Their children were starting to, they were being born with severe disabilities and deformations, and I started to get involved with the Agent Orange problem in the U.S. with my fellow veteran. I would like to add that a couple of things that were mentioned that I actually witnessed here in Vietnam during the war as well. I did in fact see Agent Orange being sprayed in central Vietnam, and on a couple of occasions I asked my superior officers what the heck was this that was being sprayed, and the first answer I received was that, well, it's mosquito spray, and I shouldn't have to worry about anything. Well, it happened again about a week later. I was actually returning from a patrol after witnessing once again something being sprayed from the air, and in a matter of about 12 to 15 hours, returning back through the same trail, noticed that the vegetation was either dead or was in the process of dying. It was wilting, and that didn't really sit well with me. I didn't think that mosquito spray would kill vegetation as it did. So I asked the question again, and I was finally told that it was indeed one of the herbicides that were being sprayed, and in fact it was Agent Orange. And again, I was told that the reason it was being sprayed was that we as an American military were receiving such high rates of casualties during that particular time that it was being done on our behalf. It was being done to protect us because the North Vietnamese Army and the National Liberation Front, or the Viet Cong, were able to use such effectively the
Chuck,
vegetation.
bring us up to date. Bring us up to date in terms of how Agent Orange survivors in Vietnam, in Da Nang, where you are, how are they coping?
Well, it's very difficult to cope. You know, as has been mentioned, you know, there are severe illnesses, disabilities, people being born with severe deformities, And I would add that it's well into the third generation here in Vietnam, and I think it is in the U.S. as well at this point, and it's approaching the fourth generation. What's really insidious about the problem today is the genetic result of exposure of Agent Orange by one's parents or grandparents and now great-grandparents. A big problem in Vietnam is the majority, in my opinion, of people that are affected by Agent Orange are, in fact, marginalized. Not purposely so, but they are because of poverty that they experience and because of the illnesses that they experience. So it's a very, very severe problem. It continues to be an insidious problem, and there's just not enough being done by certainly by the United States government, nor the manufacturers of Agent Orange. The only project of any significance being funded by the United States government in Vietnam is the remediation of the Da Nang International Airport, which was one of the largest military bases during the war, and it continues to be one of three of the largest hotspots in Vietnam. And what that means is the dioxin levels in and around the airport in Da Nang are several hundred, if not thousands of times higher than accepted dioxin levels throughout the world.
So Chuck, just give me a break for a moment, because I want to show back here on my laptop. This is Da Nang Airport, and this is where a lot of Agent Orange was stored, and it is now being cleaned up bit by bit, funded by the United States. Leanne, what else needs to be happening? Because this poison is still in Vietnam in many places.
I'm glad you asked, because in Vietnam, there are many affected people who do not know they are affected. And so there must be a way of providing health care and social services for these people. Not only social service, because children have affected by it, the parent has to stay home and they cannot produce any money. We have second generation of affected, second generation of Vietnam veterans in this country. They need to give medical assistance and disability benefits too. There are Vietnamese Americans who are affected in this country, and that their offspring was still unaccounted for.
Why is it taking so long? Because you only have to do a tiny little bit of research and look at the results of the poison, the toxin, and then you're like, okay, how much do we give and when do we give it? This is what I'm thinking as just respectful to innocent civilians. This, both sides of in Vietnam and also in the US. What's taking so long here?
Because it's the US and the 37 manufacturer of Agent Orange denied it, the effect of Agent Orange. They consider still today they are safe for everybody. Safe for Vietnamese today. It's safe for Vietnamese only, and it's not safe for everybody else.
Wow.
So only Vietnamese are not addressed.
And Heather, I saw you nodding your head there, so I want to go to you, but I want to share just some things that, as Nhan was saying, as he was talking, I want to share some things that people were sending us in agreement, really. This is Alkaline, who says, the U.S. should always lead by example by accepting responsibility for Agent Orange and cleansing it off Vietnamese soil. And we got this video comment from Merle. She's an activist on this issue, and I want you to have a listen to what she had to say.
It's finally time for the U.S. government to step up and do the right thing, to heal the wounds of war and provide justice and compensation to the victims of Agent Orange, the chemical weapon that was sprayed over Vietnam during the long U.S. war. The victims in the U.S. and in Vietnam need medical care and all kinds of rehabilitation. So we ask people to support the Victims of Agent Orange Relief Act of 2015, introduced today by Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Thank you.
So Heather, what are you thinking when you hear these messages of support? Do you get that assistance?
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with Nhan and with Merle. We have a huge issue in Vietnam, and it needs cleaned up. The 28 hotspots are the responsibility, I believe, of our government because we have left poison in the soil. I do believe that it needs to be in conjunction with the Vietnamese authorities and everyone work together to clean that up. But I also do agree that the suffering in Vietnam is great. There's also many second generation and third generation children here in the United States that are totally ignored by the U.S. government. If my mother was the Vietnam veteran, my birth defects would be covered by the government. But because my father was the Vietnam veteran, they have denied all birth defects in the children of male Vietnam veterans, except for spina bifida. And there are 18 birth defects that are covered in the children of women Vietnam veterans only, without cause. The only reason they say that they will cover them is because of a woman's service in Vietnam.
Heather, do you feel like you're chipping away at their resistance at all? Do you feel like eventually it's just going to be a no-brainer?
I really hope so, because in the world and out in the general population, people believe wholeheartedly that Agent Orange causes birth defects. Right. People accept that. They believe that. However, my government, who sprayed my father and killed him and then maimed me, has abandoned me and all the second generation children in Vietnam, the third, fourth, fifth generation, their environmental damage in Vietnam, the veterans here who have long wait times. I mean, it's a huge epidemic, and most of it is being swept under the rug and totally ignored, and our history is being rewritten as if we don't exist.
What struck me in this story was that regardless of what may or may not be acknowledged by the chemical companies or the US government, that there are lots of people around the world who are helping second generation, people who are still suffering from Agent Orange, third generation even. Let me just play you a little clip here, because I think this is really the spirit of what's happened to a lot of the survivors here. This is a program called the Vietnam Program, Facing the World. Dr. Nile is part of this program. I'm going to show you a little clip of some of the work that they've been doing.
In 2 weeks, Facing the World have performed 20 operations. They're heading home.
The best recommendation for the work that I do is they go off, they live their lives.
The bond continues back in London in the weeks and months ahead.
The lip looks a lot straighter, is it?
The internet links the surgeons with Da Nang.
The first identical here.
We're just looking at his scans. Massive difference.
Yes, I understand, but I have question here.
The care goes on. The children are on the mend.
Chelsea to Da Nang.
So now I know we've done programs like this before, which are incredibly depressing. Often people are watching these going, what can I do? There's going to be a lot of people watching this right now going, what can I do? You have the skills of a surgeon and you spend time in Vietnam and your colleagues do. What can other people do?
Well, there's a huge demand for medical help for so many deformities in Vietnam. And there are a range of charities that do work in Vietnam to try and help and support the children that are born with deformities. We are just one of those charities, Facing the World. We've been going for about 11 years now and working in Da Nang for the last 7 years. The answer is that in order to help these children, they often need very complex surgical procedures performed by teams of surgeons, and supporting the charitable efforts.
I've got a minute. People are going to be hanging on your words here. What can people do to help?
Well, they can support the charities that are out working in Vietnam with financial resources to help bring the teams to train surgeons in Vietnam to look after the children themselves.
Okay, that's one thing. You can look up on stream.aljazeera.com. We'll give you a couple of other options and we'll tweet them out as well. I know that you won't want to leave the show just hanging there without wanting to help a little bit. Malika?
Another idea from the community. People talking about U.S. needing to take responsibility. Let's be real, this person writes, there must be action to demand before the U.S. takes action. So now we have to ask the right questions.
All right. Thank you very much to all of our guests, to Nhan, to Heather, to Nile, also to Chuck as well, and for you for taking part in the programme as well. On the next show, protests in the US city of Baltimore. What type of change will the movement bring to its residents? That conversation on the next AJ stream. Until then, I'll see you online. Take care.